thank you for joining this agenda setting and collaboration workshop. I'm going to let Richard just move through the slides as I talk, because they're quite simple for mine. So just I want to help just remind us what the purpose and vision of the TIDAL Network Plus is, and it's to improve the quality of assistive technologies and hence the lives of people who use them. And I'll just make a note that that's not just disabled people, it can be people, you know, the user group can be older people, for example, but also we all have temporary disabilities. We can break legs or things, or have moments in which assistive technologies can be useful. The vision is that we should be innovative, sustainable and equitable. That's what we're looking for in our assistive technologies, and that they could be both physical and digital. So I think this agenda setting workshop is a great example of how the physical and digital can come together in a sustainable, equitable and innovative way. So next slide, please, Richard. So everyone's clear, these agenda setting workshops are sort of helping to set up a more collaboration workshop, which then will help lead to people applying for some pump priming money. We're going to have 4 funding calls over the life of TIDAL Network Plus. We've had one on responsible engineering, and this is the second. We're aiming to fund about 8 projects up to about £60,000 each, roughly speaking 2 from each theme, and the 4th theme is not yet defined. So we're waiting to see if there's a huge, you know, interest in one area, then maybe we'll redo that theme as the 4th theme, or maybe people will suggest a 4th theme. Each project, one of the problems that we found when we were researching getting the money for this the TIDAL Network Plus, is that there's quite a lot of money invested by EPSRC into assistive technologies, rehabilitation, technologies for older people, technologies that help activities of daily living. But oftentimes it gets to this sort of TRL level 5 challenge, where basically we don't seem to get them into the market quickly enough. It might take 9 years, or they might just die along the route. And so we, as part of trying to help mend that, we want to make sure that each project has an industry mentor, so that people can begin to understand that early design decisions can can impact the manufacturing decisions, and the manufacturing decisions can impact the design decisions. So next, so this is the timeline. 7th of July, 5 PM, a deadline for expressions of interest to be submitted. Then at the 4th of August, the full proposals. We'll review the proposals over August. Then there'll be some shortlisting on the 29th, the week commencing. And then people will get a week or so to respond to reviewers' comments. And then around the 11th of October, we'll make final decisions on which projects to fund. And so mid-October, people will get emails to let them know the good or the less good news. And then we enter into a contracting process, which we've given a long time for because universities are slow, and hopefully in February 2023, the projects can begin. So that's the sort of timeline that people should be aiming for. So why did we pick this topic? Well, without AT, people are at risk of being excluded, isolated and economically and socially marginalised. And despite innovation, societies still lack equitable AT provision. So we see that across the UK, different NHS, different parts of the NHS have different levels of funding, but also within different postcodes, you can have different levels of service. And when you speak to anybody in the NHS, as anybody who is part of the NHS knows, that there is a severe lack of resources. We believe that digital and distributed manufacturing systems could help unlock some of those problems. We've got this critical shortage in qualified personnel, and we have the conventional manufacturers typically labour intensive and time consuming. So just going back to our responsible engineering call, we had a bit of a focus on prosthetics at the time. And within prosthetics, there might be, for example, areas where we could introduce DMS to help unlock some of the critical shortages in prosthetists and actually free up prosthetist time, as an example. So this is why we think DMS is a good topic. And move on, please, Richard, thanks. And then, as somebody more intelligent than me once said, the 4th industrial revolution creates a world in which virtual and physical systems and manufacturing cooperate with each other in a flexible way and at the global level. I'll add that there's also this idea of virtual and physical systems for delivering assistive technology. So how we now provide assistive technology is not only through people coming to clinics and physically being assessed. There is this physical virtual world of service provision, as well as this physical and virtual world of manufacturing. So in the fourth industrial revolution, we include everything, like loads of great things: Internet of Things, collaborative robots, augmented virtual reality, big data, additive manufacturing, etc. I was at the London Tech Week the other day, and there was a massive conversation about creative industries and the metaverse, and how I didn't realise, but there's job opportunities in the thousands that are going begging in that space, and many of them are in the well-being space. So the fourth industrial revolution could improve productivity, efficiency, flexibility, agility, delivery, customer experience, and hopefully what we care about, sustainability and equity. So why do we mention all of this? Just within, partly it's to help people have a steer of application forms later, where you might want to mention things. So when we're trying to ask about what's the benefit of applications, then people could begin to look back on some of the ideas around the fourth industrial revolution and how that's going to help us as a society. Next, please, Richard. So we're EPSRC funded. I really do sort of put a line under that. Therefore, we aim to stimulate underpinning research. So we're not trying to get things that are already developed to market, for example. That would be Innovate UK. So we're looking at underpinning research, and we're looking at the exploitation of advanced digital software telecoms, digital tools for semi-automated capture of patient/user data, remote or redistributed or maybe semi-automated computer-aided design of custom fitting or personalized assistive technology products, and flexible, adaptable, on-demand or redistributed manufacture closer to or at the point of care. And what today, the aims of the workshop is to stimulate discussion. Hopefully this has given some food for thought, or you have some food for thought in your own head about potential of DMS to radically improve the quality and access to assistive technology. We ultimately want to help seed partnerships across the network and across other networks. So you'll hear from other networks today, and to answer questions and help you prepare to develop a bid or to contribute to the community. And finally, to inspire innovative proposals for our call. And there's a link to the call just below that point. So our speakers. Should I introduce the speakers, or should I hand over to you, Arian?
You can hand over to Arian now. Thanks, Kathy. That's brilliant.
Thanks, Kathy. I can do introducing the speakers. And ladies and gentlemen, today we have a fantastic lineup. We have Mr. Paul Fotheringham. Paul is the founder of 3D Live Prints, and he has extensive experience in additive manufacturing in healthcare, and not only in Western societies, but also in upcoming economies. Today, he will talk about opportunities and challenges of digital manufacturing systems, and then especially the need for manufacturing and quality control, implementation and implications. So I'm looking forward to that one. Then we have later in the lineup Professor Wendy Phillips and Chris Howell. Wendy is a professor of innovation at the University of the West of England in Bristol, and that team, both Wendy and Chris, will talk about the opportunities and challenges of digital manufacturing, manufacture, supply chain, logistics and distribution. And what is more important, I think, is that that is based on the findings of a research project they are currently doing. Last but not least, we have Lynn Leck, who is officially trained as an occupational therapist. At the moment, she's an honorary senior research fellow at the University of Glasgow, and then the School of Medicine, Dentistry and Nursing. And Lynn will talk about the user perspectives of additive manufacturing. I know Lynn for a long time. We both worked both in European settings and in Africa. So can I give the floor to Paul?
You can. I'll just see if I can take control of you 1 second. Let's see if this works. Perfect. Great. Well, good morning, everyone, and nice to meet you. So my name is Paul Fotheringham, and I started 3D Live Prints about 10 years ago now in Nairobi as a social enterprise looking at using additive manufacturing for upper body prosthetics, mainly trans radio. And really, I was listening to Kathy give the introduction there. In my organization only exists because of DMS. Without DMS, we would not exist today. And as I sort of looked at her points, and I was nodding there around that everything that she mentioned, we actually do. So really within our organization, my background itself is as a computer scientist. I spent most of my career in Asia, but spent 7 years in Nairobi, working in about 26 countries, trying to bring up the social enterprise. We morphed into a commercial organization within the UK, where we sit at the point of care. So we sit currently in 7 hospitals in the UK, NHS, from the north to the south, and we operate in 4 countries now, UK, Spain, UAE, and in America now as well. And really providing personalized surgery using digital manufacturing systems. We just happen to use additive manufacturing as our underlying capability, but that could be replaced with anything. It's just that additive manufacturing fits our needs. So we put people and tech at the point of care, and that normally involves highly qualified biomedical engineers that sit close to the action, close to the surgeons, with a variety of hardware and software that can fit the needs to provide medical devices, simulation solutions, educational and training devices. But our main focus is around medical devices, everything from class 1 to class 3, which could be for pre-surgical planning, intraoperative use, through to short-term implantation for things like surgical guides, and I'll give a little case study about that a few slides on, and then into long-term implantables, mainly in the craniomaxillofacial space, for plates for eyes, for jaws and so forth. But really, as back to again, all this is underpinned by digital manufacturing and our ability to have a global platform that can be accessed anywhere, anytime by our engineers, and distribute the manufacturing as well. So there could be a person in Dubai that's working on a case for Texas, and then that data could be eventually sent to a printer, for example, in Texas. So really, I'll talk about some opportunities, some challenges, and a bit of a focus on medical regulations, which we live and breathe every single day under ISO 13485 and under 510Ks with the FDA, that enables us to be able to sell these products to hospitals, clients, surgical training centers, and so forth. Oh, here we go. So I'm not an academic. I was a computer scientist back in the day, so I'll let the people smarter than me talk about the more in-depth around, where digital management systems came from. But, for 25 years now, I've been using computer CAD programs, and it really is allowing us to link the systems in the process. So to understand what was my process before about making a device and giving it to a client, and how to digitize that, how to look at the market for appropriate bits of software and solutions that allow you to, overcome a number of challenges and improve your time, cost, and efficiency. For me, as a commercial entity, I have to be closely looking at how much does it cost me to make things, how long does it take me, what's my cost of goods sold, and how can I make this more efficiency. And that could be things like utilizing big data, more in the AI space for automation or semi-automation to extrapolate patient data, and then move that forward down the workflows. I mean, the physical technologies, as I mentioned, that's really just the last piece in the puzzle for us. Step number 10. The 9 steps before are probably more important, to be honest. And so we often provide products that are not only physical, but can be digital, and that could include everything from virtual surgical planning through to ability to do advanced CAD design and prototyping, etc. So really, for me, the background from this industry, call it 4.0 or something like that, is that we're seeing a lot more movement over the last 5 years, especially within this space. A lot more people are moving into it. There's a lot of work to do, I think, within this space, certainly, and lowering the costs of the solutions, lowering the costs of ownership of the platforms, and really, how do I scale out organizations and SMEs like myself to, we're looking at going to 250 engineers in the next 5 years. So to get to that level, I have to use DMSs. There's no way I can have physical presences, physical infrastructure without the ability to do that, and to keep standardization and consistency across that. Everything we make could positively or negatively affect the patient care. So we take, the most care we can to ensure that what we provide will do more good than harm. Next slide. There's a slight lag here when I move. There you go. So opportunities, so I touched upon that in the last slide a little bit. For me, it's about, as I mentioned, the ability to use a globally distributed workforce and then leverage that manufacturing capability underlying. So I could have engineers in 50 countries, for example, as long as I have a cloud-based secure platform. And we'll talk a bit about security in a very sort of brief way when we get to quality control, but within the NHS, certainly, and within a lot of the HIPAA compliance in the US and under the NHS toolkit, the ability to take patient data and the confidentiality is extremely important. So to build such a DMS that allow you to be able to securely process GDPR and so forth is also very important. Standardization, excuse me, is very important as well. If I am doing, let's say, thousands of jobs now within certain centres a year, I need to ensure that I can have a cookie-cutter approach towards that process and towards that ability to take data, manipulate, extrapolate, analyze that data, and then push it forward down the chain towards either a final product, which could be a digital model, a digital plan, or a physical product that can be interacted with. And removing human errors is extremely important because if not, the MHRA will certainly be having words with me when we get regularly audited as an ISO 13485 organization, and the same with the FDA. They're very strict, obviously, in terms of their eyes on you. And back towards how we do it at the point of care, I'll come to that the next slide, sorry, slide after, around manufacturing in-house, using in-house clean rooms that are, again, very strictly controlled. So again, it's having that marriage between your digital management systems, which is, gone are the days of physical servers sitting in racks and basements, trying to use cloud-based as much as possible, but ensuring the security. Understanding internal costs is a big opportunity, I think, for anyone using a DMS. Again, lowering your infrastructure costs, lowering your CapEx costs, lowering your general return on investment for the infrastructure, be it virtual and physical, you acquire. Our tagline for a business is personalizing surgery. So for me, with DMS, the ability to personalizing of healthcare is coming in many facets now, from personalization of pills that you'll take. You're taking a number of pills together, personalization of medical devices for implants for your knee, personalization of a surgical guide. About 0.3% of all global surgeries, which is in the region of about 300 million plus, are personalized. So there's a 99.7% appetite or movement within there to personalize surgery. And what personalized surgery? Personalization of surgery has been clinically proven in thousands and thousands of publications to improve patient outcomes, and also for a hospital from a financial perspective to lower their operational costs. And that can come in a number of ways, in terms of reducing custom implants, reducing or avoidance of further surgical procedures, towards having more surgical procedures to increase your surgical list. So there's a whole bunch of things that that the personalization brings, not just from a patient outcomes, which should be number one, but obviously from a financial and financial control perspective, they have to look at also how can we make our costs more effective. And the last point, I think, is about leveraging cloud-based digital platforms. There is a hybrid approach that could be taken towards having physical infrastructure and cloud-based infrastructure, but I'm a huge advocate for cloud all the way. One of the challenges we do find in using cloud-based digital platforms in the NHS is they have internet bandwidth that looks like it came from the 1970s. So often we have internet links that can be 1 megabyte or 2 megabyte at best, which actually poses us challenges because working with patient data and working with the types of data that you may work for personalizing a prosthetic socket or a pole cover, etc., is large amounts of data. So ability to have that going up and down towards cloud platforms is a problem. So there's certainly an opportunity within NHS Digital or NHS Digital X, I forget what they call now, towards improving general infrastructure that allows third-party firms and internal within the NHS to leverage these platforms. So a bit of a case study. So you may have mentioned around what we really do. So here's an example of our bread and butter where we use digital management systems 95% of the way towards that. So on the right, with all the wires and things, that's the hip, and the yellow thing is a nasty tumor. And so in this case, it was a resection of that tumor from the hip area. Now the wires are called K-wires, and they're inserted temporarily within the hip to give it integrity as they cut these bad bits out. And on the right, you can see that is a digitally planned and then digitally created implant for the removal of the femoral stent. So really, the steps within here is extrapolation of the patient data. That could be CT, that could be MRI, it could be a PET, and then looking at the regions of interest for that. In this case, you're taking out the hip and the areas from the patient, and this is all being pushed through our digital platform that we had to build ourselves because there's nothing out there on the market that came close towards having this workflow that could be ISO'd, it could be FDA'd. So once we've done this sort of initial look here, 3D visualization, we have the virtual surgical plan. And now this is a very key bit that, mainly the plans today, unless they're 2D templating, are done with paper and pen. So the surgeon will sit down and work out where they're going to do the particular cuts. And as part of what we're doing here with digital to physical additive manufacturing to create the surgical guides, in the past, if they wanted to do a hip operation, they would open you up. And in many cases, they would literally take a blue marker pen, draw on your bone, the bits they wanted to cut out. We take away all of that, down to sub-millimeter accuracy. And what does that bring? That brings accuracy in terms of resection, so less chance of taking a bit of the tumor, which is obviously very bad, which then moves towards better rehabilitation rates. And with all of this, with the digital management system, we collect data. Feedback for us is everything. So in every single case we do, we have a defined set of health economics questions that we ask the surgeon that enable us to quantitatively work out the benefits, what we're doing and how to improve the systems. Not just, did you enjoy the service? Did the patient recover quicker? These are all very well, but don't allow us to actually do a deep dive. And then we do a whole bunch of big data in the background to crunch through these cases and then use these as business case justifications for further adoption of digital management systems. And the last bit within here is once we've made the devices before they go in the body, they are sterilized by the hospital and then implanted. And then we come to the last slide, slide before last, about challenges. We'll talk then about the plethora of regulations that exist around how can I provide the NHS or any other hospital with a device that meet their IFUs, which is their protocols for sterilization, in autoclaving, for example, and then be put in your body. For me, I would want to ensure anything that goes in my body has a great deal of rigor being done on the processes, the people, the workflow, the QMS, the machines, the materials, before it goes into the body.
Thanks, Paul.
I'm almost getting there. I'm trying to.
Okay, sorry.
All right, so I was pushing the right button. I hope I'm not taking too much time. So challenges, quality control. Love it or not, I'm not sure I do. Quality control consumes a lot of my life. So medical regulations are overbaked in many ways, but exist for a reason. We spend an awful lot of time talking to the MHRA, talking to ISO about how we calibrate our temperature sensors, how we calibrate our calipers to ensure that we're measuring things. So really on the right, you may be able to see the diagram, it's a little bit small. This is our process from receiving scans to the segmentation, which is the extrapolation of data from the patient scans received, through to the design, and that design may be designed to throw in some guides or some implants, to printing, and then on to delivery. Now each of these 1, 2, 3, 5 boxes has a lot of quality control and a lot of regulations that exist within there. So in ISO 13485, there's a number of blocks within there that mean you have to do verification and validation on every single step. And that is from, if I took a scan of a patient, how do I know when I make a virtual model or a physical model, how do I know that that's actually reflective of the patient's anatomy? So every sort of 5 cases or so, we have to then go back and retro or engineer that, which maybe go back towards creating a CNC lathe device that's then CT scanned to ensure that we're within about 0.2 millimeters of accuracy. As I said, if make a cut in the wrong place, then you could adversely affect the patient. Quality management software systems, huge. There's a whole bunch out there off the shelf, mainly related towards the aerospace and aeronautical industries as opposed to medical. But we've taken a best of breed stack and allowed us to then customize it heavily, a bit like SAP, be able to workflow there. And then for that, we patent these. We have IP in these, and then these are then pushed to market to allow us to produce these in any country in the world. And the last bit, around quality control is hardware materials. People often forget that you cannot just take at face value what the vendor tells you it's a biocompatible material, it's been tested in their labs. That does not matter at all. As an SME for us, we spent probably £100,000 going through labs all across the world to ensure that they're, for example, USP class 6 for things like cytotoxicity, if I can say it, for genealogy, for irritation, for sensitization, and all these things sort of couple up towards a bigger package of quality control that allows you to be able to sell products in the market. So one thing, getting this quality control and getting it, a different thing is keeping it. Trying to keep this certification is as hard as getting it, again, for a reason. You need to make sure that you're not taking your finger off the pulse, and every device you make has the same level of rigor as the first device you made. And then the very last slide. So really 3 points here, and hopefully we can sort of maybe delve more into this and in the discussion point a bit. But where are we now from a healthcare perspective? I'm sorry, I've been quite focused on obviously what I do as a business, as opposed to more assisted technologies. I guess you could call it an implant, an assisted technology as well. Where are we just now? We're in, I would still quite nascent. I would still say on the probably gone now Gartner curve in the lower quadrants, in that it's not been generally adopted. The NHS is trying hard within there, but again, lack of resources and a lack of experience in driving toward these type of digital technologies. The focus has not really been on healthcare, but now with things like Philips, Siemens Healthineers, Google, Amazon, there's definitely a lot more focus now around these. But what they're doing really is swallowing up companies. Instead of making themselves, they're buying small companies to fit into their larger ecosystem. So where do I think it will be, or should it be, in 5 and 20 years time? In 5 years time, I think it won't be much different than it is now. I think one of the major problems towards the adoption of digital management systems and the adoption towards greater use of that is reimbursement. Reimbursement within the healthcare industry is not great. In the NHS, there is no reimbursement really for personalized devices outside of, for example, custom-made devices for craniomaxillofacial. It's been the big challenge for me. How do I get paid as an organization when there's no tariff codes being set from an NHS pillar perspective? In the US as well, things called CPT codes. They sit in a CPT level 3 for about 5 years until enough data has been pushed into these codes. Once enough data has been pushed into these codes that prove that it is more than beneficial to parents, then the insurance companies adopt these codes. And how does that data get in there? From digital management systems. So as I mentioned, as we collect all this data for each and every case, we feed that back into, for example, in the US, it's called the Radiological Society of North America. That's the keeper of all this data. And the NHS and Europe, from MDD to MDRs, needs to have more of this towards making it easier for organizations to enter the market. So, the last point here, what are the main barriers towards it from my perspective is reimbursement. There's a lot of Innovate UK awards out there for 100,000, a million, etc. But for me, there's about a 3% success rate for Innovate UK. They're just too big and laborious for us to tackle. So in my view, the main barriers towards, from a healthcare perspective, is lack of reimbursement and a real lack of appetite, I think, at the higher levels within the NHS and UK government, for example, towards helping SMEs be able to enter the market. If not, for me, 8 years on with 8 offices, I should be sitting here just now with probably 16 offices or more. But because we have to sort of fight for every penny we get, it makes it hard to focus on growing the business. So that's everything from me. Hope that didn't take too long, and looking forward to questions later.
Thanks, Paul, for your presentation. I would like to suggest something, because we are a little bit ahead of time with 10 minutes. And instead of having a break at 10:55, I suggest that we go through all the presentations and then have a break, because then we have a nice flow. Wendy, would you be so kind to take the floor with your team?
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you, Val. I'm just waiting to get control of my slides, so I might have a slight pause as we wait. So thank you for inviting me. So my name is Professor Wendy Phillips. I'm the RHINE Director. I'm heading up an EPSRC programme which is looking at redistributed manufacturing in healthcare. Apparently I can control my slides, but it's still not working. So there we are. Okay, so Richard and his team tasks me with discussing the opportunities and challenges of digital manufacturing. So based on the research we've been doing since 2015, looking at bringing manufacturing close to the point of need or care within the UK healthcare system. So I'm going to present what we found so far, and my colleague, Dr. Christopher Howell, will be giving maybe a more bigger holistic view of it in terms of presenting some maps, so we can just see some of the complexity of thinking about digital manufacturing, but also how, if we move towards a more redistributed model of manufacturing, some of the steps can be simplified and made easier. So I think Paul has very articulate, with great articulation, and has really sort of helped in terms of some of my slides, because he's given a real life example of the difficulties and the features of digital manufacturing. So at risk of repeating some of the points that Paul made, I'm just going to go over one of the key points. So Paul said himself that the product could exist in a virtual form. So the benefits of using digital manufacturing is that many of the processes can be alleviated, but a digital product can be designed and tested before physical manufacturing, but many of these products can be a virtual form in terms of management of data systems, customer requirements, and so forth. So it's a great step forward in simplifying the process. In terms of the research we're doing, digital manufacturing is essential in moving production away from large centralized sites where it's mass production of standardized products, to moving it much closer to the where the patient is, and the benefits there are many. I know we're talking about assistive technologies, but the research we look at also looks at cell and tissue therapies, so alleviating that dependency on a cold chain, but also in terms of the steps that we're moving towards now in terms of a net zero economy and the pressure that NHS is facing in terms of becoming more sustainable. By alleviating those huge distances travelled and moving the production facility close to the hospital or the patient, does mean that we are minimising the air miles and hopefully more moving towards a more sustainable approach. And by removing the need to produce multiple physical forms of the product before major production, means that there's less waste involved, and the visibility of issues in terms of where there may be problems in production means that we may move towards a much leaner, quicker system. Paul talks very much about the personalization, and increasingly the customer, in terms of the patient themselves, can be much more involved in determining the design of the end product. We're seeing that in terms of what some of the medical devices we're looking at. Open Bionics, who are based down in Bristol, enable the end user to be involved in the final design, but through open source and so forth, we're enabling others around the world to be involved in the final design of the product. So we're moving much more to this notion of prosumers. And again, this notion that we will be able to move towards personalization of healthcare. And because these technologies can be quickly set up and utilised, we can see snowballing of the production around multiple sites, even within the UK, but globally. And the work we're looking at now is looking at deployed operations. So using these manufacturing technologies across multiple sites where there's been a crisis, whether it's a military zone, a humanitarian crisis, or a major emergency crisis, that these can be rapidly set up, allowing for snowballing. And now there's much more multi-user participation. So Paul talked about having a designer in Dubai and maybe having a product printed in Texas, for instance. So users around the globe can be involved almost in real time and have visibility of the data and have much more awareness of the whole production process from a start to finish. Okay, I'm just moving to the next slide. It's taking a while, so my real time. Just waiting for the slide to move forward, sorry. Okay, so finally, I'm going to be talking about the benefits of real-time manufacturing. So as you can see, there may be some issues here. So we've been speaking to a multitude of different stakeholders within the UK healthcare sector. And some of the main benefits we sort of produced in a white paper that's been delivered and has been employed by the MHRA to try and move towards new forms of regulation. So as Paul iterated, there's much more joined up manufacturing process. So data can be monitored, trends can be identified, and any issues can be quickly dealt with, flagged up before they become a major problem further down the production process. Because the data is no longer needs to be held by a third party and interpreted by a third party, that multi party involvement across the supply chain means that it minimizes the risk of misinterpretation and any issues that can arise through misinterpretation of reading the data. So in that effect, it can improve efficiency as makes the process much quicker, slicker. And of course, being able to extrapolate that data and see what's going on, where the issues are arising, or what the trends are, means that the decision making is much easier along the process as well. And because we're minimizing potential risks and problems throughout the across the whole of the value chain, so across from the accessing the raw materials, food to the finished product, there's an ability to save money there and get the product quicker to market, because we're minimizing the issues or problems arising throughout the process. And because suppliers can be engaged and have access to the data, and there's this more joined up approach, there's much closer opportunities for suppliers to work with the manufacturer, the customer throughout the whole time. We talk about real-time manufacturing visibility. So again, because we can monitor across the whole process, any issues that seen can be quickly flagged up and dealt with before they become a major issue. And if there's any point where there might be a need to tweak the design, this can be done rapidly before and in a virtual form before a physical product is produced. So several processes can be eliminated across the production process. And also we can sort of have a concurrent process. So alongside the physical manufacturing, as data is read and further information is gathered, then again, the design can be tweaked and changed. And the big promise for us and the work we're doing in deployed operations is particularly within humanitarian sector where they're resource constraint, is that a lot of the testing potentially can be done before the physical product is produced, which can minimize cost and waste along the whole process. So allows for quick changes in the whole product design. And we're able to now move away from standardized mass production towards mass customization. So in the past, it was maybe trying to design a product that would be fit for purpose, but maybe wouldn't suit certain key sectors or markets. Now you can have mass customization where target groups can be incorporated into the process. So there can be mass production efficiency and speed, but we're able to target and design around specific needs or niches. Okay, I'm just moving to the next slide, so bear with me as we wait for that one to move on. Okay, so the work we're doing is on redistributed manufacturing. So this is a quick overview of how it looks like. So we're removing several steps within the manufacturing process where you'd have the manufacturing, packaging, transportation from a centralized hub to the hospital, potential storage, and then delivery to the patient. Whereas we could see these micro factories that could be located across the country close to the point of care or need. So we could have manufacturing within the clinical facility or next to the patient's bedside. You can, as you can see, several steps of the process are removed. So we've been looking into this, and in terms of the key issues flagging up with respect to digitalization is that there's need to support the value chain, not only vertically but horizontally, so we can support collaboration amongst all the key parties and support real-time monitoring. So we've got multiple sites, and the one thing that gets the regulators edgy is how do you monitor quality, efficacy, and quality assurance across these multiple sites. In the past, they could visit centralized, 1 or 2 centralized facilities, whereas now they're much more reliant. We're moving towards potentially thousands of sites around the country. So how do they ensure the same quality of products being delivered across these sites? So I'm just waiting for my next slide. So the work that we've done is flagging up these challenges as well if we're going to move towards a digitally enabled redistributed manufacturing approach. So one of the key problems is, and I think Paul alluded to that, is that we're not ready yet, and maybe 5 years, but could be 10 years. The healthcare infrastructure, particularly the NHS here, is not geared around moving towards this notion of digital manufacturing. And there is that nervousness about how to ensure the efficacy, the quality across multiple sites, and how do we maintain these supply chains to rapidly respond to any major issues. We've seen with coronavirus and the pandemic, the problems we've had with supply and rapid response to huge peaks in demand. And again, how do we ensure that there is this well-connected, digitally responsive supply chain? The key issue at the moment is moving towards regulations and standards that support digital manufacturing. We aren't there yet. The MHRA are trying to move towards ensuring we can support manufacturing across multiple sites, but the innovation in regulation is not quite there yet. They're moving towards it. So again, the burden of multi-center digitally enabled sites, how do we support that? And Paul talked about the big data. How do we ensure security, control, protection of that data across these sites to ensure that patient safety is still maintained? And how do we manage this data? So the acquisition, transfer of data across these different sites. Building on that is ensuring there is trust in the partners, digital trust across the value chain, the multiple suppliers and partners involved in this transfer and data. There needs to be trust amongst one another, and this again will come over in time with digital as the regulation and standards become more clear. And the moving towards online monitoring and automation. So again, it's so much promise, but the flexibility needs to be there. If we're going to do promise on personalization, customization, able to rapidly respond to peaks in demand or change in demand, that means we need flexible and replicable platforms across multiple sites, and that they ensure close to real-time measurement, so we can ensure that if there are any issues, they're quickly dealt with and addressed. And how do we ensure the integration and management of these data sets across all these different sites, which could be global as well as UK-centric? Yet the biggest issue, and I think that this was mentioned at the very beginning, is that we don't have the workforce there yet. And that's about getting involved in the design of curriculum, not only at university level, but within schools, down to primary school level upwards, to ensure that we're moving towards this digitally enabled workforce, because at the current moment, we aren't quite there yet. I know as a university, we're moving much more into integrating digitalization into our programs, but again, it's going to take time to move towards that way. My final slide talks about redistributed manufacturing in deployed medical operations. So that's our key focus over the past year and a half, 2 years. So we're working closely with the defence sector, humanitarian agencies and emergency responders at looking at how redistributed manufacturing could be employed. So this slide is has been produced by my colleague, Dr. Helen Sanderson, who's working closely to identify the operational requirements for redistributed manufacturing. And some of the key issues that have flagged up do relate to digital manufacturing. So surprisingly, actually in terms of engaging with 5G networks and so forth, they're quite easy to access around the globe. But the issue that relates to using digital manufacturing systems is very much around accessing a reliable power source and integration of the manufacturing systems. So ensuring automation, quality assurance, so enable responsive production. But as I said, without a reliable power supply, then it's not possible to ensure manufacturing output. And again, it will have a huge impact on the quality of the product that's delivered and the ability to use robust IT systems. Security is always a major issue, particularly in the sectors that these organisations are operating in. So in the humanitarian and military crisis, very volatile. And so ensuring that communication lines can be maintained is difficult. Ensuring that infrastructure is robust and able to operate under these volatile conditions is a major challenge for these organisations. So when thinking about developing technologies for austere environments, these are things that have to be considered. Often we talk about frugal innovation, where we can use maybe less sophisticated but maybe more sustainable applications that can be used in these situations. So we need to think about independence from power and mobile power solutions. So that's an overview of the work that we've been doing in the EPSRC Redistributed Manufacturing and Healthcare Network. I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Dr. Christopher Howell, who's going to talk through the whole bigger picture using some value stream maps so you can see the complexity. And very thankful that Chris is able to present one of the feasibility studies that we funded through our EPSRC Rhine network. And I know Dr. Conor Mine is here today. So we're presenting from the picture of difficulties of moving towards a redistributed model. So I'm just going to hand over to Chris now.
Thanks, Wendy, for leading us in. So yeah, it's good to cover all the bases of what we're doing. And as part of the Rhine Redistributed Manufacturing Healthcare Network, I'm presenting some of the work undertaken by Conor Mine and the team at Imperial College London, and how we're applying lean thinking or value stream mapping to understanding the process and elucidate some of the value so we can tell our funders. So thanks, Paul, for your talk as well, because it'll be good to connect and follow up about how you're trying to do that and kind of like demonstrate the value that you're implementing and how digital manufacturing will support that. So when we're talking about requirements for redistributed manufacturing in deployed medical operations, particularly in the defense sector, we're thinking of maneuverable, flexible, and robust solutions. Again, we're talking about the lower complexity and the modularization of applications, and all of this enables like prolonging field care. So we're trying to promote sustainability or promote the provide a scalable response to the incident, to whatever crisis that we're trying to address. Again, we're talking about resource independence. So we're talking about a solution that you can operate, that can work in the field, and is pretty much self-sufficient. And we're reliant on a lot of remote technology. So we're talking about 5G enablement. We're talking about being able to communicate to the cloud and be able to pull the files or resources that we need to complete or enable that manufacturing at the site and at the point of care or at the point of need. I am trying to click ahead here, but it's slowing me up somewhat. So like I said, we're trying to reduce that logistics burden. We're trying to overcome some of the supply chain logistic problems. So particularly for the cold chain, particularly if we're trying to keep some products cold through their journey as they're trying to get from A to B. We're trying to speed up treatment, potential diagnostics, and improve patient outcomes. Again, supporting long-term hospital care. So once you install this facility, particularly in the humanitarian sector, obviously it's going to be there for a while, so it needs to be installed and then be able to be left alone and operate for a period before it is finally superseded and replaced by a new system. And this promotes far forward innovation, and that's got to work with the operators. So again, as Wendy touched on, we need to know about the skill sets that are coming through the education and training that's required to enable this technology to really take off. So I'm going to talk a bit more about value stream mapping. So this is taking a kind of traditional manufacturing treatment or process of a value stream or supply chain, and we are looking to understand the kind of metrics of value to the end users and the kind of patients, the actual customers who are going to be receiving that. So in terms of what they want in terms of value, we understand to be things like safety. So we understand that they want their product or whatever they're going to be receiving to be deemed appropriate and to meet the safety controls that are put in place. So Paul alluded to a lot of QMS and ISO 13485. The FDA approvals, the quality, so it's got to be fit for purpose, so it's got to be for medical purpose, it's got to be the right medical use. Delivery, we talk a lot about having the right thing at the right place at the right time. Cost obviously is a big factor, so NHS is very cost driven. Defence sector is on a huge drive to kind of reduce the cost where they can, so we need to understand where the costs occur in terms of price, time, handing over between personnel. Again, coming to people, we need to understand like what skills those people have to have. Do we need to have physicians being able to instigate this kind of technology, or could we have less skilled medical staff to kind of implement it, nurses or other support technicians? And then finally, what we're looking towards is the environmental impact. So if you do have to load a whole lot of medical kit onto C-130s and send them around the world, that's a huge amount of carbon that's released into the atmosphere doing that every time. So if we can produce those medical supplies at the point of need, we're massively reducing that logistics burden, and we're massively reducing that carbon footprint. And all of this leads into kind of solving the problem of time. So the time between medical treatments, between the steps of intervention, the more we can reduce that burden, the better outcome we can have for the patient. And that's the overall understanding of what we're trying to do with value stream mapping. So I'm going to talk a bit about Connor's work. This is one of the studies that RIN has funded and that we'll talk about today, albeit briefly. So on the left, you can see like an 11-year-old child who's had a maxillofacial contusion. This will require facial orthotic to be applied. And if you can see image B, that shows that the orthotic is being applied to the patient, and after 10 months, that has helped the patient restructure their face, reduce scarring, reduce swelling, and get them back onto track. Now, over the course of those 10 months, that patient will repeatedly have to go through the treatment process that you can see on the image on the right. So what happens on the right is that patient will have to be fitted up with plaster of Paris. They'll then have a mask taken off their face from that, and then there'll be a plastic former manufactured from that plaster of Paris mask, for which eye holes have to be cut out, and the technician has to go through several machining and polishing steps to kind of like get that to something that will fit that patient's face. Now, what we're hoping is that by using digital technology, as Connor has demonstrated with his work, is that you can use commercially available technology. So in this instance, they've been able to use an iPhone to produce a scan of, this is a member of the lab team's face, and they've been able to use software to automate a lot of the post-processing steps. So they've used software to do things like, take that image and then thicken it up for use as an orthotic, and then remove things like the eyes, the nose, the mouth, so it can be used as a viable orthotic to kind of support facial structure. That file is then sent on to a 3D printer, so it forms a CAD file. It ties in the appropriate kind of scaffolds and supports whilst it's printed. And then, as you can see in the lower section of the slide here, from A, B, and C, and D. So A and B shows that the 3D printer file is kind of constructed. The B is the final print. C is where you do have some technical technician intervention to kind of remove those scaffold supports and then sandblast it with a rough grit. So 2,500 grit, and then finally a clear lacquer supplied to make that facial orthotic kind of clear and kind of see-through. So that's the final kind of orthosis that hopefully will be applied to the patient's face. So in what we've done as part of RINE is to actually understand the current state of how that works in the defence environment. So moving through the process flow of treatment, we understand that, the first thing that happens to a field casualty with that facial industry is that the priority is to kind of stabilize the treatment, make sure there's no additional bleeding, and get that patient back to the UK as fast as possible. So you stabilize that patient for transport and get them back to the UK. When they're in the UK, they then go through the state of rehabilitation. A lot of physicians kind of like make sure that critical injuries are cared to. And then further down that patient care treatment pathway, that is the step where a prosthesis is kind of manufactured to kind of help rejig that patient's face back into the shape that it should be. So that is an intervention that happens much further down the line, and it's more of an outpatient procedure that's done within UK care medical facilities. In the future state, we're promoting the idea that that prosthesis can actually, that intervention can come much sooner in the patient care treatment pathway. The idea is that it's almost the second step. So the idea is that you can have that 3D printer in a military field hospital. That casualties facial scan data can be provided from the forward operating base before deployment. So that biometric data can be taken from a scan before deployment and then sent on to the military field hospital. So that patient, when they have that horrific traumatic injury, they can be provided that prosthesis much earlier in the care patient treatment pathway and have that intervention. So that's the idea where we see that intervention kind of like will drop in there. Now, if we look at the manufacturing, and I'm sure Paul's touched on this, you can see that in the traditional state, it's very convoluted and there's a lot of steps that go from A to B. The patient needs to be coming in and be fitted up for that plaster mask. But if we look at the future state, we can see that care patient treatment pathway is much more reduced, much more streamlined, and there's much less intervention required from the patient. The patient only needs to come in for the final fitting for the prosthesis if the scan is sent on digitally and provided to the orthotic lab. So the technician can carry on about their work with a minimum amount of skill required on their end to actually 3D print and produce that orthotic. So I hope that gives an idea about what we're trying to do. And in this, we're trying to capture these values. So understand, on the left, we're looking at the current state, understanding like, where the OPEX costs, the CAPEX costs and kind of like the skill level of the people involved. And in the future state, we're trying to articulate in the argument that there'll be less handovers, there'll be reduced costs, and much less patient transport between the different areas of the treatment. And finally, that time and that intervention is far reduced, and that intervention comes much earlier in the patient care treatment pathway. So I think I've covered pretty much what I've got to say today. And I hope that gives you a flavour of what we're trying to do and the arguments we're trying to articulate with redistributed manufacturing. Thank you.
Thanks, Christopher, and Wendy, of course, for this very, very good, clear talk. I did a little bit of miscalculation because I thought we were ahead of time, but obviously we are not. So may I suggest that we have a 5-minute comfort break and then invite Lynn to do her talk. Shall we say that we are back here at 10:05 again? Or 11:05 it is probably, yeah? 11:05. So everybody who wants to have a wee comfort break, we will start in around 5 minutes again. See you later.
Are we the only two left?
Sorry?
Are we the only two left?
No.
I'm still here, Wendy.
Oh, hi.
Be aware that the microphones are still on, Lynn.
Yeah, I'm just going to go and grab a drink.
Yeah, so we are the only ones who are still floating around visually. Yeah, there are a lot of people. I heard some, how do you call it? Church bells on the background.
Yeah, can you hear them just now?
Aye.
Yeah, hold on. I'll take you for a wander.
Sorry, everybody's looking with us, eh? You know that.
That's okay. So I'm in Berlin for anybody who's listening and looking. Staying in my son's flat. My son and his partner's flat.
You have to tell where you are, Lynn.
Can you see?
Oh, yeah. So where are you at the moment?
I'm in a place called Charlottensburg, which is in Berlin.
That is in Berlin. I think that people wanted to know where you were in Berlin.
Yeah, I'm in Berlin. I'm not always in Berlin, but I'm in Berlin just now. I am cat sitting, Mika, and plant sitting and house sitting in that order for my son and his partner Svenja. So they're away off to Svenja's grandparents' house in Lake Maggiore in Italy.
Good for you.
Can I rent you out? I need dog and cat sitting in August.
You know something? I was actually thinking when I was wondering about yesterday, because this is the second time I've actually done dog, cat, plant and house sitting.
Yeah.
So I was in Sierra Leone last month and I stayed at my friend Dan's house. So I went for a wedding, but I also went to see to meet the hospital staff that I'd been working with on some research. And so when I was there, Dan came back to the UK for a wedding. So I went to the wedding in Sierra Leone, he came back to the UK for a wedding. So I looked after his pussycat, who's called Ulrike, and I looked after his plants as well. Unfortunately, Mary, who's his daughter's nanny, also, she stayed around just to make sure I was okay. Not like Sierra Leone.
I need a dog sitter too.
You do? Oh, do you? Okay, well, maybe I should just get set up a diary of different places to go. And
yeah, you could globally trot around the world looking after dogs and doing research.
I have 7 dogs here in Spain. Welcome anytime.
I was wondering where you were. Where are you in Spain?
Yeah. I'm about half an hour north of Barcelona. I've been here now for 5 years.
Wow. So you're not near the forest fires or the fires?
I think that's Andalusia, I think. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's scorching hot here. It's been 39 degrees for the last week.
Yeah. Oh dear.
Yeah, it's very, very hot here as well. I'm not quite sure what it is, but maybe it's been like up 35, 36.
They've had fires near Berlin as well, haven't they? So
I've not been that long here and I haven't heard about them.
Yeah, I live near Glastonbury, so I can't go anywhere because everybody's trying to get to the festival. So,
are the trains back on?
No, well, the ones that aren't running very well. So yeah, so basically, if you live here locally, you're just told not to go out because you're not going to get anywhere. So.
I'd love to be at Glastonbury.
I can hear it. I can't.
Friends of mine are going today. Like loads of friends of mine are going. So any social media of mine is just pasted with, and we're off to the. Break for the world.
Who would be your favourite to go and see?
To be honest with you, it's not so much the music as well, the music's great, but it's more the vibe. Does that make sense?
Atmosphere,
like, in there, and like I've actually not been, but loads of my friends who have been always describe it as like it's the way you would want society to work, and it's like a break from the general capitalist neoliberal.
It is when they're there, but when they go, maybe there's a hell of a lot of cleanup.
You could make this work full-time, long-term, but it's nice to have a few days of a different reality, which helps you feel like connected to everybody, and So I've not actually been to Glastonbury, but I have not been lucky enough to get tickets, but I'm going to try next year.
I can get residence tickets, but I always miss that as well. But so, yeah, but it is yeah, but afterwards there's a lot to tidy up and clean up. It's
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's the tent pegs for the cows is a big issue. So
oh yeah, I can see that.
I have friends who help set it up and clean up. They're like, but they allow dogs while they're setting up, but then they have to like send their dogs away. When
I could do dog sitting service for them.
Then next year I'll bring the dog and Wendy.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And I've got a shower.
Well, that's true. Well, sometimes you get a free one.
More
we know when Glastonbury's coming because it suddenly starts raining. So
I was last week at the conference and a festival in Holland, And I agree with Kathy, you go for the vibe, not necessarily for the music of the theater though, but that can be a little bit, a hit and a miss, but the vibe is good. And I agree, it was very amicable and there were no incidents whatsoever. It was really, really good. So yeah.
Whereabouts in Holland?
Oh, it was the islands up north.
Oh, no, because my husband's from the north. He's Frisian, so yeah.
Oh, he's Frisian.
Yeah,
does he
I
speak
know.
Frisian?
Yes, he does. So every time I think I can understand Dutch, I realise he's speaking Frisian. So
yeah, that's a little bit. That's the same as Welsh and English. Yeah, that's completely different. Yeah.
yeah, very different. Apparently, the closest language to English.
Yeah, it's funny because my family comes from the up north from the Isles. Yeah. But I don't speak Frisian though.
Oh well, you know, you're not a true Frisian.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, no, they love Terschelling, so they're always going up there. So yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that everybody was able to listen to our fantastic banter. We also have now a network of dog and cat sitting. So anybody who has a request, you can put an email out to us. So Lynn, if you're ready, I suggest the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Arjen. I am just waiting to check that my slides will actually move on. So I'll say hello and greetings from Berlin. My name is Lynn Legg and I'm a health researcher. I'm going to talk to you from a patient and carer's perspective today. And I need my slides to move on.
We can't see you, Lynn, if your camera is off.
I know, it's deliberate.
Okay. No, fair enough.
So actually, do you mind just holding on, just waiting for a few seconds for me?
Yes, of course. Otherwise, we can ask Richard to move the slides for you if you're comfortable with that, Lynn.
Okay, so what I was planning to do was to actually make you wait for 20 seconds and assume that it had some effect on you, which I think it clearly has had some effect on you. Richard, can you put this slide?
Yeah, just tell me when.
Now. Again. Again. Are you again? Again. 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 And again. So, not sure this is going to work or not, but what I was trying to do was actually pick up on something that Christopher said earlier, and I'm going to have it as a common theme throughout this, which is time and how important time is and waiting. So what I'm going to do now is provide you with some situations where you are made to wait. And I want you to think about how long it would take you to react, if at all, and how it actually makes you feel. Slide. What about a green light and the car in front of you that isn't moving? How long before you toot your horn? Slide. What about the people who are still talking after the movie has started? How long before you give them a big loud shh? What about waiting in the surgeries to see your GP? How long before you speak to the receptionist or anyone at all who looks official? My favourite one, the airport security queue, especially when I'm late and running for a flight and panicking. Next, what about waiting for your significant other to get ready? How long would you wait for an assistive technology intervention that works for you or for a loved one? I made you wait for 20 seconds, and I'm hoping that I made you think about situations where you are made to wait, which may not cause you to get emotional. Waiting for assistive technologies that are fit for purpose is a different matter altogether. Waiting can cause a variety of negative outcomes. I want to introduce you to some people who've had to wait for assistive technologies that are fit for purpose. And I want to highlight some of the problems that have occurred because of the wait. The people that you see on the screen, this is my Auntie Maureen, we call her Auntie Momo, and also my Uncle David, and it's taken in Scotland. Slide. My Auntie Momo was diagnosed with cervical cancer and breast cancer in 2015. She had surgery to remove her uterus, including her cervix. She had a total abdominal hysterectomy, which means her uterus and her cervix were taken out through a large incision or cut in her abdomen. She had systemic chemotherapy, which means that she had chemotherapy drugs injected into her veins. The purpose of the chemotherapy drugs was to stop the growth of cancer cells, either by killing the cells or by stopping them dividing. She was also on tamoxifen, a commonly used hormone therapy for breast cancer. Auntie Momo also suffered the side effects from chemotherapy, including, slide, tiredness. She was incredibly tired. She was constantly feeling sick and being sick. She suffered from hair loss, and she had the best wig I've ever seen. It took years off her. She also suffered from lots of infections. She developed anemia. She bruised and she bled easily. She had a sore mouth. She had skin and nail changes, sleep problems, and she also had diarrhea. But what we didn't expect her to come up with was chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy. Slide. This caused her to have numbness and tingling in her hands and feet. She had sensitivity to touch and temperature. She developed muscle weakness and a loss of muscle in her arms and legs. She developed weakness in the dorsiflexors of her foot and of her right foot, causing her inability to lift her forefoot, which is called foot drop. Because of this, she developed a change in her gait. This led to an odd walk, and the odd walk caused her to trip and fall. She also developed problems with fine motor skills, including like buttoning her clothes or tying her shoelaces and writing. Slide. So I'm going to focus on the foot drop, and the interventions for foot drop were wear shoes with soles with a good grip that are supportive but not too tight, and also to get herself an orthosis. Slide. Was it a happy ending? Well, no, absolutely there wasn't a happy ending. There was a delay in recognising the chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy. There was a delay in orthotic intervention. There were lots of visits to the orthotist over a period of 6 months, with lots of different measurements and lots of different fittings. In between times of over the 6 months, she suffered several falls. There were several ambulance call-outs, and she had several emergency admissions to hospital. And unfortunately, my Auntie Momo died before receiving orthosis that was actually fit for purpose. My reason for telling you my Aunt Maureen's story is for all the treatment she endured and for all the care and the cancer treatments that the NHS provided. It was a lack of a fit for purpose orthosis that actually tripped her up. The next person I'd like to introduce you to is Mrs. Freetown. I was at a wedding in Freetown in Sierra Leone last month, and a particular lady caught my attention. And this lady, I've called her Mrs. Freetown, she was carried about absolutely everywhere. And I was interested to know why she was carried about everywhere. So Mrs. Freetown was suffering from diabetic peripheral neuropathy, which is a long-term complication associated with poor control of diabetes. This is an untreated, and the damage caused by the neuropathy led to infection and limb amputation. Mrs. Freetown was eventually provided with an ill-fitting prosthetic limb. As a consequence...
No, that is our workshop. About the Rwanda.
Will I carry on?
Carry on. I think Arian just had someone walk into his office. Apologies for that, Lynn.
Oh, okay, that's okay. So I'll just say she was given an ill-fitting prosthetic limb, and as a consequence, she had falls. She developed a fear of falling. She lost confidence in her ability to balance, and now she's carried absolutely everywhere. And I actually had a fantastic photograph of the wedding that I was at, which showed her sitting in a beautiful outfit, but unfortunately I couldn't share it with you. Slide. And the last person that I want to introduce you to is Kyle, who's also called Tony. We'll call him Tony. So Tony is an 11-year-old boy, and he's in primary school. Tony has a condition called Apert syndrome, and Apert syndrome is a rare genetic condition that's characterised by malformations of the skull, the face, and the limbs. Some of his fingers and toes are fused together. So Tony requires special shoes, and Tony is also a growing boy. Getting shoes to fit Tony's special feet during lockdown was absolutely impossible. And as a result, Tony had to wear slippers to school for more than a year. Of course, walking around at school in slippers and wearing them in the playground is a health and safety issue. Therefore, Tony spent over a year in a wheelchair. Slide. So you can see that there's some serious consequences to having to wait for fit for purpose ATI. And this includes, it compromises people's health and safety. It definitely increases people's disability and dependence. There's a huge impact on dignity. It can exclude and isolate people. And I think, like you were having to wait earlier, I think causes huge frustration, uncertainty, and annoyance. And having spent a long time with my Aunt Maureen going between our sort of cancer hospital and to the orthotist, you know, you really do get quite annoyed at having to go back and back and back. I also think it affects people's confidence in the service that they're getting, and also in the staff that are providing the service and in the assistive technology intervention. And naturally, when you think about my Aunt Maureen, with her multiple visits to accident emergency, there is a huge cost to health and social care services and to family members and to their carers. And when I was listening to the talks earlier just about the number of steps that you have to go through, and actually seeing it from a patient and carer's perspective, and also in my past life, a clinician's perspective, even gathering the information which shows how often someone has to go back. And I don't know whether that's a possibility or not, but there's loads of people going back and forward, back and forward, back and forward. And I'm sure I could give you many more case histories for that. Slide. So in summary, what we need is the right ATI for the right patient and at the right time. Slide. And I'm sincerely hoping that you can help with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn, for this user-facing presentation. I think that will be appreciated by a lot of the engineers under us. I would like now to hand over to Richard and Mikko for the next part of our morning.
Good morning, everyone. The next phase of the activity really is to start to gather some of your ideas. You're all participating in this workshop, hopefully because you have ideas for research projects that can come forward to us in the funding round. I'm hoping you've all got lots of ideas, and we're also going to follow up on some of the ideas in tomorrow's exercise, where we look at building collaborative teams. So we should now all have a link to a Miro board, which will enable you to add your ideas. So hopefully we'll also, if Mikko can, he will put the link to the Miro board into the chat so that everyone can access the board. Excellent, thank you, Mikko. I'm now going to hopefully briefly share the Miro board with you so that you can see it. So hopefully you can now all see the Miro board, and you'll see people already moving around in the Miro space. And if you scroll up a little or zoom in and out, you can look at the instructions at the top. So we've got a summary of the instructions at the top there, which I'm going to revert to in a moment. And I'll leave the instruction slide up. But this is the Miro space. We have 3 columns, and this is the columns that we're inviting you to populate now over the next, say, 15 minutes or so. And what we're looking for really are opportunities, research questions, and challenges. So the opportunities, our speakers have told us about this morning, some of them, but of course there may well be others. So these can be driven by user needs. They could be driven by clinical problems or technological developments. So anything that has provoked your research ideas or aims and ambitions about how we can improve assistive technology can go into the opportunities box. And you do that by creating a post-it note using the square tool on the left, and pop something in, and then you write into that post-it note. What we then invite you to do, and you can do this for each other's ideas as well, and please put down any ideas that come to you, not just your own ideas that you wish to pursue, but any other ideas that perhaps you'd like to see other people pursue. And then I invite you to think about how that becomes a research question, and particularly a research question that's suitable for the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council that's funding us. So there will be lots of challenges and opportunities which perhaps do not fall under an engineering physical sciences remit. They could be social sciences or purely clinical, for example. So we're looking for ideas there that are particularly relevant to the engineering and physical sciences. And then once we've got those research questions down, we will then look for challenges. And again, our speakers have told us about many challenges already today. But we need to think about what are the challenges for doing the research itself. So not just necessarily the challenges that affect end users and clinicians, but what are the challenges or barriers to effectively undertaking the research that we've got in mind? These are important because these are the challenges that we hope to address in the collaboration building exercise tomorrow, by making sure that we have all of the right representatives and members in our teams such that we can address all of the challenges. So as we've seen, some of the challenges are about skills, they're about expertise, they're about being multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary, and they might be about resource, they might be about the importance of collaborating with the end user. That's been very much reinforced to us today, including users in the research process. So I invite you now to have a go. I can see people's things flying around, so please go ahead. You can see there's a very simple example we've done at the top, which will give you an idea. Feel free to replicate that or follow up on that. That was just an idea I put in just to show you an example. So we'll give you about 15 minutes or so now to go ahead and put your ideas in. And yeah, and we will, if anyone has questions as we go through over the next 10, 15 minutes or so, then feel free to put them in the chat or to unmute and ask me. And we'll go ahead. If you have any difficulties with the process or using Miro, obviously, again, just pop it in the chat and we'll do our best to help. Obviously, our speakers are also welcome to add ideas of their own as well, of course. So please, everyone, feel free to add post-it notes and add ideas to the Miro board. I'm going to stop sharing the Miro board itself now, and I'm going to click back to the instruction slides. So I can see quite a few ideas coming together now, and some challenges being put in as well. And I'm seeing also, which is great, people putting arrows linking these things together. So please feel free to add those arrows that link these various things together. It's very much something we want to follow up with tomorrow, particularly where we can find common challenges that affect lots of ideas. And we will explore tomorrow about how we address those by team building. So yeah, feel free to add arrows, not just to your own boxes, but where to other boxes or between boxes that other people have put on that you think are related. Hi, Lynn, thanks for putting your suggestions in the chat. So for everybody, please have a look at the chat. Lynn's making some suggestions for you all there. And I'm sure, and again, I invite other people also. I can see some ideas popping up in the chat. So if you feel more comfortable or that you feel that's something that everybody should consider, feel free to pop it in the chat, and hopefully people will look at those. I think, you know, the evidence gathering, for example, I think is a great idea. Circular economy and recycling, obviously that's an issue that we should all be aware of. I think you could probably consider that to be an idea, perhaps, in terms of how do we add circular economy to a process which typically isn't circular at the moment. A lot of assistive technology has not been considered to be circular. It's not typically reused. So, and I see something from Dominic responding exactly to that. So that's great, Dominic. Hopefully you can bring that expert to the party, or at least let us know who they are in our collaboration and team building exercise tomorrow. That's great. Thanks, Dominic. It's good. I'm very glad to see that the challenges are being recognised and put down, because I think obviously what makes the research valuable is our ability to respond to those challenges and overcome them. Yeah, it's all starting to get very well populated now, which is good. I see some ideas around customization and personalization, which is good. One of the key themes that was introduced by our speakers today. I see under the challenges, it's excellent to recognise educational pathways and training and skills. I think generically across all of these issues, skills is going to be something that we should all address. So not only the skills of the people that would be involved in the research itself, but how we influence and upskill or retrain or train the future generations of the people who will be generating these assistive technologies, delivering them, providing them to patients in the future. I can see some challenges around audit and validation, and that's great. And I think one of the other key messages from our speakers today is to consider the whole process and to try and avoid the trap we've fallen into in the past with EPS research, where we've developed a very clever and interesting technology, but its application into actual clinical practice has proven to be problematic because we haven't considered the whole process. So I think about, with your ideas and your ideas about the research, think about what comes before and after that step in the process. So if you're thinking about an automated design technology, for example, that I could see in the ideas, how is the user engaged in that process? And have we considered that from the beginning? What skills are required from the clinical staff to engage with that digital technology? Do they have those skills, and are those skills appropriate? So these are all the things that can then obviously get put into the challenges. Yeah, I'm just trying to read some of the ideas. There's lots of ideas being generated now. I can see things about postural support, but also telemetry and the use of sensors and data. And again, that's been one of the key themes reinforced again by our speakers, is the ability to collect data and have that feed back into the design and manufacturing process, so that it's a process of continual improvement. So rather than going through a process of designing something and that design being fixed for many years, it's actually something where continual modification, improvement, enhancement is built into the process by gathering data from users, from the products themselves in use. So we will have about another 5 minutes or so on this. So if you've still got ideas, please keep populating them. Keep looking for those links between the ideas, the research questions, and the challenges. I can see security and IP being mentioned as a challenge, and again, that's been brought up by our speakers today, the importance of data security, privacy, which obviously has to be taken very seriously, talking not only about personal information, but also potentially very sensitive personal information about medical records, for example. Be good for you, Lynn, to keep looking at the challenges and see if everyone's recognizing the user's perspective here, and keep emphasizing that element there. I can see how that's come into some of the challenges here.
I couldn't actually get access to the Miro.
Oh, okay. In that case, oh, sorry about that. Okay. In that case, yeah, feel free to keep putting things in the chat, perhaps. Could you not see the link in the chat?
I did see the link in the chat, but it took me to something completely different.
Oh dear. Okay.
And then I started to have a panic, and I thought, I'll just come back to where I am. No,
that's fine. That's fine. But if I invite you just to use the chat then, and please keep popping things in the chat then.
I would be interested to see what comes out of it.
Indeed, and what we'll try to do is, well, obviously we'll figure out what's wrong and we'll share it with you after the event. And we can invite you and in fact all of the speakers to feedback. So we'll share the Miro boards with you after tomorrow is finished, and you can comment or have a look at those things and give us recommendations. But also as co-investigators of the grant, we will look at common themes and elements, and we will try and because we hope some of these things might cluster. You know, there'll be similar things cropping up. So although the ideas might be different, some of the challenges will be shared, for example, and we'll perhaps try and collate some of those things to give advice to our academics to say, when writing your research proposals, please try to bear in mind these following key messages. Like I say, some of those key messages already been reinforced by yourself and our other speakers, and the other ones we will try to gather from this exercise.
Might also be worth saying, Richard, just that some of the circular economy chats, so for example, Dominic's point on looking at waste and things, that also cuts across with the responsible engineering call, you know, so there might be also, I think, I feel like some of these will intertwine into the fourth call as well. There'll be like a more nuanced, maybe fourth call that we can put out around these things.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kathy. Yeah, I think with all of the calls that we have, there's no doubt going to be overlaps potentially between them, and so you know, it would be perhaps a case of different emphases, but we do have that opportunity with the open with the as yet undefined fourth call to modify that and come up with something that responds to any gaps that we've identified in the 3 other calls. So just while you're working on these ideas, just to let you know, the next call will be about sensors and data. I see there's some ideas here already mentioning sensors and data, but where that perhaps becomes the emphasis, please bear in mind there will be a future call specifically looking at sensors and data acquisition. Okay, everybody. Well, this will remain open, so if you want to continue working on it whilst you listen to the next few the next few slides, then that's absolutely fine. Again, some more ideas from Lynn for you to take a look at. So I'm going to revert to the slides again shortly and talk you through some advice about applying for EPSRC funding. But please feel free to continue working on the Miro board whilst you're listening. And indeed, the Miro board will stay live overnight, and we'll come back to it in the session tomorrow. So if you want to keep working on it, or you get the opportunity to work on it later tonight, that's absolutely fine. And we will come back to it in the team building and collaboration building exercise tomorrow. Okay, so I will go back to the slides and start talking about key themes and funding guidance. So we need to talk about eligibility. So this is EPSRC funding. For those of you not familiar, that's the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. So that is under an organisation called UK Research and Innovation. So this is where the government provides funding to UK research and innovation. That is split into 7 research councils, of which EPSRC is one, and that is who is funding our Network Plus. And therefore, when we apply our funding, we make these funding calls available. We're effectively operating under EPSRC eligibility rules. So there's a link there where people can check eligibility, but essentially to be eligible to be the lead organisation, therefore the lead applicant organisation, it should be a higher education institute or a recognised research organisation in the UK. That does include NHS trusts and university hospitals, and it does include some other research organisations, some of the catapults, for example, places like the Manufacturing Technology Centre. But if you're unsure about the eligibility of your institution, you can go to that link for the EPSRC and have a look. But typically, for our purposes, the lead institution would be a UK university. Commercial businesses are not eligible to be the lead of the funding bid. For those kinds of opportunities where it's more about the development of a commercial opportunity or getting something that is beyond proof of concept and getting it into the marketplace, then that would be directed towards Innovate UK. And again, if people have ideas along those lines, we can make referrals or point you in the direction of Innovate UK funding, where the reverse is the situation where the businesses have to be the lead applicant and universities can be the supporting partners. Typically, businesses will be partners, and we expect or hope that businesses will partner with these applications, but they would typically be supporting the application rather than financially benefiting from it. In terms of the actual individuals, so again, to be the lead applicant, what we call the principal investigator, then you would typically be an employee of an eligible institution. And so in that case, usually in the UK, that would mean that you would be an academic employed by a university. But as I've mentioned, you could be a researcher in a recognised research organisation. So that could be somewhere like a Catapult, or indeed an NHS institute or a teaching hospital. Typically, for major EPSRC funding, the principal investigator would have to be a full-time permanent employee, so a lecturer or above. But for our purposes, because we're dealing with smaller amounts, we are opening this for the principal investigator to be someone who's on a fixed-term contract. So they could be a research associate or a research assistant working on a fixed-term contract for a university or an eligible institution, as long as their fixed-term contract exceeds the length of the project, so that obviously they don't end up being having their contract of employment terminated before they can finish the project. So that's a slight difference to usual EPSRC requirements, and it's a great opportunity for postdoctoral researchers to to get experience in leading and developing a research proposal. So we very much encourage people to do that. So if you're an academic and you have potentially eligible postdoctoral research associates or research assistants, then please consider supporting them as an applicant, rather than perhaps you being the applicant and with the RA supporting you. So what are we looking for? So these are some of the key bits of general advice, really. We're looking for obviously new, ambitious and challenging ideas. So we're trying to use this, it's modest, it's a small amount of funding, but this funding is very much seen as pump priming. So we're expecting this funding to enable the kickstart of something that's new and more ambitious that would lead to more significant funding in the near future. So we're looking for new, ambitious and challenging ideas where you need a little bit of impetus, a little bit of pilot money to kickstart and initiate that process. So we're looking for unanswered research questions. So it's important to focus on what is the research question. So this is a research core, funded by a research council. So we are looking for research opportunities here, not commercial development. So if something's at a high level of technological development and ready to be translated in the marketplace, that's not the kind of thing we're looking for. So we're looking for underpinning research, fundamental research, so that could be theoretical or applied, but underpinning research that will enable future step changes in our current practice. So we've seen and we've had described by the speakers the challenges and the problems that are available to us. We're not looking for tiny, incremental, small improvements. We're looking for underpinning research that will facilitate really significant leaps in the future. We're looking for strong, diverse, multidisciplinary teams and interdisciplinary researchers. So we want you to engage with the specialisms, and particularly specialisms that are not typically active in assistive technology. Often, there's lots of people working in assistive technology, and we see them time and again doing great work. But in order to really make these quantum leaps, these significant leaps, and given the challenges that we've had described to us by the speakers today, we really need to think about who else do we need in our teams: computer scientists, even legal experts, people from business studies, for example. So, and that will be very much the focus of tomorrow's exercise, is to think about that. But that's what we're looking for. Obviously, the involvement of users from the outset has been stressed by all our speakers today, but particularly Lynn. So have a think about how you include your users in the co-creation of the research itself. So not just being passive beneficiaries of research, but actually being part of the research and being involved in steering, directing, or influencing the actual research itself. And that includes the generation of the actual research ideas, the generation of the research questions. And then, of course, appropriate clinical and industrial support. So ultimately, we're looking for opportunities here to influence clinical practice and to put things into manufacture, for which we'll need the cooperation and the support and the advice of people from industry and clinical partners. So think about who those partners would be and how they would engage with your project to give you the kind of information you need to make sure that you're answering the right research questions, but also you're collecting and conducting your research in a way that facilitates its future development into clinical practice and into manufacture. Obviously, this is the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council we're funded by, so we are looking for research that is predominantly focused on engineering and physical sciences research challenges. That's not to say we can't encompass and include and recognise research questions which stray or overlap with social sciences or even the arts and humanities. That's absolutely fine, but the majority or the focus should be in engineering and physical sciences. We're looking for direct involvement of digital technologies. So for this particular call, obviously the focus is digital manufacturing systems and anything that facilitates that. We've had a previous call on responsible engineering. So if you have ideas that are particularly around environmental friendliness or sustainability, I can point you towards that call. We'll have a future call on census as data as well, as I've mentioned. So if you have ideas that focus very much on that, you might think about the next call. So we're looking for feasibility studies that will build a strong foundation for a future, more ambitious research proposal. So the amount of funding we're offering is modest, we know that. We're not expecting step changes in practice to result from these feasibility studies. What we hope is that these feasibility studies will enable a future, more substantial research proposal to go to EPSRC that might perhaps be in the millions. So the idea is that we de-risk future substantial research proposals by enabling some feasibility work to go ahead earlier in the process. Clearly, these are short projects with modest funding, so we're looking for a very detailed and sound plan to make sure that the resources are utilised efficiently and that we do in fact get the right deliverables that we're looking for. The kind of things we're not looking for then really is, like I say, anything that's incremental, predictable. We're not really in a position to fund things that are purely about survey or audit. There are other opportunities, there are other mechanisms for funding that kind of work. We're not looking to fund follow-on studies or translational or commercial development work. As I've said, if you have ideas in that area, or if we think those ideas are in that area, we can direct you to alternative funders, which might include research charities, but also Innovate UK. Obviously, we're looking for projects which have a focus on engineering and physical sciences. So if the emphasis is not in that area, again, we could direct you to other sources of funding, which might be research charities or the other research councils. We want to encourage teams, multidisciplinary teams, so single applicants, so a single individual applicant from one discipline would not be the kind of thing we're looking to fund. Obviously, any projects which are not directly relevant to assistive technology would also obviously not be in our remit, so we would reject anything where there wasn't a clear focus on the ultimate benefits to assistive technology. And clearly another thing would be any projects that completely lack any user involvement are not what we're looking for. So some advice in the last few minutes that we have. So the funding is modest, as I've mentioned, it's small, so a total cost of £60,000. So you need to keep the scope and the ambition of the workload tightly focused. It's a short duration of a project, so sometimes recruiting an employee or a research assistant purely to work on this project might be difficult. As we all know, recruitment is particularly challenging at the moment. So please look for opportunities to utilize existing staff or perhaps to extend existing staff rather than trying to recruit. You can recruit, of course, that's not a problem, but just be aware that sometimes that can be a challenge to go through the recruitment cycle, which can take many weeks, sometimes months, for what is quite a short project. Be realistic about your workload, your plans and your deliverables. We'd rather see a very detailed plan that we have a good degree of confidence in than a very ambitious plan that looks risky. So, like I say, it's a modest amount of funding. Be cautious about what you can achieve with that level of funding and how much resource you can allocate to that that project. And think about the feasibility study and what you're going to generate from the study. Think about how are those deliverables from this feasibility study going to feed in and facilitate or enable the next step, and that next step hopefully would be a more substantial research proposal going to EPSRC or perhaps another research council. In terms of the staffing and the people who we see working in these projects, obviously we want to think about diversity. We want to see nice diverse teams that include all of the relevant voices and give opportunities to people that perhaps don't typically enjoy those opportunities. And we're particularly keen to support early career researchers. So make sure you build in opportunities to engage with your users and stakeholders. So that might be not necessarily just people who are partners in your initial proposal, but how you might engage with users after you've got your findings. And look for leverage of other forms of support. So, like I said, the amount of funding is modest. So have a think about how you might leverage other funds that are available from partners, from charities, or from your own institutions. That's my final advice. If there's any sort of last minute urgent questions, we've got about 5 minutes for any particular questions. And then just to introduce tomorrow. So tomorrow will be the collaboration workshop, which will follow a similar format to today using Zoom and the Miro board. We'll go back to the Miro board and we'll move to the right. So if you haven't already done so, if you scroll to the right on that Miro board, you'll see the spaces where we will populate the activities tomorrow. But the focus tomorrow will be on collaboration and team building. So identifying the people, the skills, the disciplines that we need to see represented in our projects to ensure that they're as successful as possible and do ultimately produce these kind of step changes we're looking for.
In fact, Richard, apologies, they are not visible at the moment because I did hide them, but they will be visible tomorrow.
Okay, so thanks, Miko. Yeah, so yeah, you will see them tomorrow. And then tomorrow also, I will go through the application form with you and talk you through the various bits and what we expect to see in those elements of the application form and give you the opportunity to ask questions and clarify things about what we expect to see in those parts of the form. So with that, I think we've actually ended up back pretty much on time. So I'll hand back to Kathy to give some closing comments.
Well, thank you everyone for your great comments. That Miro board, I'm still reading it. There's a lot of wonderful connections that I think are between the different challenges and the opportunities. We'd love to have some feedback from you. We're always trying to make these better as we go through. And I noted the comment from Emmanuel in the chat saying that they would like to be introduced to members of research teams, and we'll make sure to have time for that tomorrow and help you. If you send an email with more details, exactly what you need, we can help think about how we include that as best we can. But otherwise, I'm just looking forward to tomorrow. I think it's going to be great. There's a lot of great energy. It's interesting that some workshops can have energy even online, and I feel like this one does. So that's great. And so I look forward tomorrow to seeing you all, and thank you to the speakers, all of you, for giving your time to set the challenge and also to share your experience. It was really fascinating, and I certainly learned a lot. So thank you one and all, and see you tomorrow. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, everybody. Look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye all.